The coin hit the conveyor belt and rolled sideways, spinning in slow circles, before settling flat with a soft metallic clink. Then another coin followed, and another. The old woman's fingers trembled as she reached into the worn fabric of her coat pocket, pulling out handful after handful of loose change, spreading it across the belt like she was offering everything she had to the world.
I'm sorry,
and
but
hoping
that's
it
still
would be
not
enough.
You're holding up the line.
The line behind her grew longer. A man in a suit checked his watch. A woman with a stroller huffed loudly. A teenage boy rolled his eyes and pulled out his phone. Nobody moved to help. Nobody said a word of kindness. They just stared, the way people stare at something inconvenient, something that is slowing them down, something they wish would simply disappear. And then Lisa spoke. "Seriously?" Her voice cut through the noise of the supermarket like a blade. Sharp, loud, designed to be heard. She was 26 years old, with perfectly manicured nails that she drummed against the register with theatrical impatience. She had worked at Hargrove's supermarket for 3 years, and in that time, had perfected the art of making people feel small. "Are you actually paying with coins? Do you know there are people waiting behind you?" The old woman looked up. Her eyes were pale blue, soft and watery, the kind of eyes that had seen a great many things in a great many years. She did not look angry. She did not look embarrassed. She simply looked at Lisa, the way a person looks at a storm, patient, steady, waiting for it to pass. "I am sorry, dear," she said quietly. "I just need a moment." "A moment." Lisa repeated the words with a laugh that was not a laugh at all. It was a performance. She turned to the customers behind the old woman and shook her head with a smile that invited them to join in her cruelty. "She needs a moment, everyone. Hope you are not in a rush." A few people chuckled nervously. Most looked away. One woman near the back of the line whispered something to her husband, and they both shook their heads. But nobody said stop. Nobody except Maya. If you are new here, welcome. This channel is where real stories live. Stories about kindness, about justice, and about the moments that change everything. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications, because you do not want to miss what happens next in this story. It is going to leave you speechless. Now let us get back to Maya. Maya Johansson was 22 years old and had been working at Hargrove's supermarket for exactly 47 days. She knew the exact number because she had been counting. Not out of excitement, but out of necessity. Every single day of work meant another small deposit toward her mother's medical bills. Every shift meant the lights stayed on for one more week. Every hour she spent bagging groceries and smiling through exhaustion was an hour closer to keeping the life she and her mother had built from completely falling apart. She was not supposed to be on Register 3 that afternoon. Her station was Register 7, all the way at the far end of the store. But she had heard Lisa's voice the moment it rose above the ambient noise of the supermarket, and something inside her chest had tightened in a way she could not ignore. She had felt that tightening before. The first time Lisa had called her the new charity case in front of the entire break room. The second time, Lisa had deliberately signed Maya up for the worst shifts of the week without telling her. The third time, Lisa had knocked Maya's lunch off the table and smiled while doing it. Maya had swallowed her anger every single time, because she could not afford to lose this job. She simply could not. But watching this old woman stand at the register with her trembling hands and her pockets full of coins while Lisa performed her cruelty for an audience, something inside Maya stopped calculating and started feeling. She walked over. "Here. Let me help you with that," Maya said, stepping up beside the old woman and beginning to sort the coins into neat piles on the belt. Her voice was calm. Her hands were steady. She did not look at Lisa when she said it. She looked at the old woman. The old woman turned to her and something shifted in those pale blue eyes. Something warm and surprised and quietly grateful. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. "You are very kind." "Don't mention it," Maya said. And she meant it. Lisa's expression darkened. "Maya, this is not your register. Get back to your station." I'm just helping a customer, Maya said simply. You are wasting everyone's time. Lisa's voice dropped lower now, quieter, the kind of quiet that was more dangerous than shouting. I am warning you. Get back to your station right now or I will write you up. Again. Maya looked at the old woman. The old woman was watching her with an expression that was impossible to fully read. Something between gratitude and something deeper. Something that felt almost like recognition. Let me count this for you, Maya said to the old woman, ignoring Lisa entirely. The total came to $14.32. The old woman had $14.50 in coins. She had enough. She had always had enough. She had just needed someone to take the time to count it with her. Maya bagged the groceries herself. 2 cans of soup, a small loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, and a bunch of bananas, and placed them gently in the old woman's bag. There you go, she said. Bless you, the old woman said. She reached out and touched Maya's hand briefly. Her fingers were cold and paper-thin, but her grip was surprisingly firm. Bless you, child. Lisa watched all of this with her arms crossed and her jaw tight. The moment the old woman shuffled away from the register, Lisa leaned across the counter toward Maya, and her voice came out in a low, venomous hiss. You just made a very big mistake. Maya held her gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then she went back to her station. Outside, the afternoon sun was pale and watery. The kind of winter sun that gives light but no warmth. The old woman moved slowly along the pavement, her bag hanging from one arm, her other hand gripping a wooden cane that tapped a quiet rhythm against the concrete. She had not driven herself to the supermarket. She rarely drove anymore. She preferred to walk when the weather allowed, because walking reminded her of simpler times, quieter times, times before everything in her life had become so enormously complicated. Her name was Eleanor Hargrove. She did not tell people that, not anymore. Not since the last time she had walked into a room as Eleanor Hargrove and watched people's faces rearrange themselves instantly. The false smiles snapping into place, the voices shifting from ordinary to performative, the sudden, desperate desire to be near her that had nothing at all to do with who she actually was. She was 74 years old. She had raised one son alone after her husband passed. She had worked 3 jobs to put that son through the best schools. She had sacrificed holidays and sleep and any version of a personal life to make sure he had everything he needed to become everything he could be. And he had become extraordinary. He had built a business empire from a single idea and a borrowed office. He had turned nothing into something that stretched across 4 countries and employed thousands of people. His name was Richard Hargrove. He owned 43 supermarkets across the country, including Hargrove's on Maple Street, including Register 3, including the register where a young cashier had just performed her cruelty on his mother for an audience of strangers. But Eleanor was not thinking about any of that as she walked. She was thinking about the girl, the young one with the steady hands and the calm voice who had stepped forward when everyone else had stepped back. She was thinking about the way the girl had sorted the coins without making her feel ashamed, the way she had bagged the groceries gently, as though each item mattered, the way she had said, "There you go," not with pity, not with performance, but with simple human warmth. Eleanor had met a great many people in 74 years. She had learned to tell the difference between people who were kind because they wanted something and people who were kind because it was simply who they were. That girl was the second kind. She turned the corner onto Birchwood Avenue and walked the remaining 4 blocks to the tall iron gates of the property she had called home for the past 30 years. The house beyond the gates was large and well-maintained, but not ostentatious. Eleanor had always insisted on that. She had no interest in houses that existed to impress. She wanted a home that existed to be lived in. She let herself through the gate and walked up the path to the front door. Inside, the house was warm and quiet. She set her bag on the kitchen counter and filled the kettle. While she waited for it to boil, she stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the garden, and thought about the girl with the steady hands. Then she picked up her phone and called her son. "Richard," she said when he answered. "Mom." His voice was warm and immediate. Whatever he had been doing, he stopped doing it the moment he heard her voice. He had always been like that. "How are you? How was your walk?" "It was interesting," Eleanor said. "I need to tell you something." "What happened?" His voice shifted slightly. Not alarm exactly. More like attention, the complete and focused kind. "Nothing bad," she said. "Something good, actually. Something I want you to see for yourself." She paused. "I want you to come to Maple Street, Richard. I want you to go to the supermarket." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. "Mum," he said slowly. "Which supermarket on Maple Street?" Eleanor smiled into the phone. "Yours," she said simply. "The one you have never actually visited. I think it is time you did. Here's batch 2 of 4. Approximately 1,675 words." Maya did not sleep well that night. She lay on the narrow mattress in the bedroom she shared with nothing but silence and stared at the ceiling and replayed the moment over and over again. Not the moment with the old woman. That part she was at peace with. She would do it again without hesitation. She would do it 1,000 times. What kept her awake was the look on Lisa's face afterward. That slow, satisfied smile that had spread across Lisa's lips like something dark rising to the surface. The kind of smile that did not mean the argument was over. The kind of smile that meant the punishment was only just beginning. She turned onto her side and looked at the small photograph on her nightstand. Her mother, Margaret Johansson, 58 years old, and fighting a body that had decided to turn against her 2 years ago. The diagnosis had come on a Tuesday in November, the kind of Tuesday that splits your life cleanly into before and after. Rheumatoid arthritis, severe and progressive. The doctor had used words like manageable and treatable. But what Maya had heard underneath all of it was expensive. Chronically, relentlessly, devastatingly expensive. Her father had left when Maya was 9. There were no siblings. There was no safety net. There was only Maya, her mother's tired smile, and a list of medical bills that grew longer every month, regardless of how hard Maya worked to shrink it. She reached out and touched the edge of the photograph frame. "I am doing my best, Mum," she whispered into the dark. "I promise I am doing my best." She closed her eyes and willed herself to sleep. The next morning arrived gray and cold. Maya was at the supermarket by 7:15, 45 minutes before her shift officially began, because she had learned early that being early was the only small power she had in this place. She liked the store before it opened, the quiet of it, the way the lights hummed softly overhead and the shelves stood perfectly stocked, and the world had not yet arrived to complicate everything. She was restocking the cereal aisle when she heard footsteps behind her and felt, before she even turned around, that particular drop in the atmosphere that always preceded Lisa. "Morning, Maya." Lisa's voice was bright, dangerously bright. The kind of bright that meant she had already won something and was simply waiting for Maya to find out what it was. Maya turned. "Morning." Lisa was holding a sheet of paper. She held it out between 2 fingers the way someone holds something they find distasteful. "HR wants to see you at 9. I filed the report last night." Maya looked at the paper. It was an official conduct notice. Leaving assigned station without authorization. Interfering with another employee's customer interaction. Potential disciplinary review. Her stomach dropped. "I was helping a customer," Maya said. Her voice came out steady, even though nothing inside her was steady at all. "You were undermining me in front of a line full of people," Lisa said. The brightness had gone now. What replaced it was something flat and certain. "And before you think about arguing your way out of this, I have 3 customers who confirmed my version of events. I made sure of that last night." Maya stared at her. "You called customers?" "I am thorough," Lisa said simply. She plucked the notice back out of Maya's hand and smiled. 9 o'clock. Don't be late. You cannot afford another mark on your file. She tilted her head slightly. Actually, can you even afford to lose this job? I always wondered. Judging by your shoes, I am going to guess no. She walked away before Maya could respond. Maya stood in the cereal aisle alone and pressed one hand flat against the shelf in front of her and breathed. In and out, slow and deliberate. She would not cry here. She refused to cry here. She had cried in the staff bathroom twice already since starting this job, and she had made herself a promise after the second time that it would never happen again. This place would not have her tears. It had taken enough of everything else. She straightened her back, picked up the next box of cereal, and placed it precisely on the shelf. 9 o'clock, she thought. Fine. 9 o'clock. The HR meeting lasted 22 minutes. Maya sat across from a woman named Donna who had kind eyes and a tired expression and the body language of someone who had been given instructions she did not entirely agree with, but intended to follow anyway. Lisa sat to Donna's left, perfectly composed, hands folded on the table. Maya told the truth. She told it clearly and completely and without embellishment. She explained what she had seen, what she had done, and why she had done it. She explained that the customer had been struggling and that no one was helping her, and that she had simply done what she believed any decent person should do. Donna listened carefully. Lisa listened with a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. When Maya finished, Donna looked down at her paperwork. The issue, she said carefully, is not the act of helping a customer. The issue is leaving your assigned station without authorization and the disruption it caused to Register 3's flow. She paused. We have also received 3 signed statements from customers supporting Lisa's account of events. Did any of those customers describe what Lisa said to the old woman? Maya asked. Donna hesitated. Because Lisa publicly humiliated a customer, Maya said. Her voice was still calm, but there was something underneath it now, something that had been quiet for 47 days and had finally decided it was done being quiet. She mocked her for paying with coins. She made her feel ashamed in front of a full line of people. And everyone looked away. I did not look away. And if that is a disciplinary offense in this store, then I think that says something very important about this store. The room was silent for a long moment. Lisa's small smile had not moved. Passion is lovely, she said, but passion does not change policy. Donna looked deeply uncomfortable. She shuffled her papers. I am going to recommend a formal written warning, she said finally, and a temporary reassignment to the stockroom for 2 weeks. Starting today. Maya said nothing. It could have been worse, Donna added quietly. And from the look in her eyes, Maya understood that Donna meant it, that something had protected Maya from a worse outcome, and Donna was not entirely sure what that something was. Maya picked up her bag and stood. Thank you for your time, she said. She looked at Lisa once, directly, without anger and without fear. Just looked. Then she walked out. In the corridor outside the HR office, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes for exactly 10 seconds. 10 seconds to feel everything. The injustice of it, the exhaustion of it, the particular specific heartbreak of doing the right thing and being punished for it anyway. 10 seconds. She counted them. Then she opened her eyes, straightened her uniform, and went to find the stock room. Richard Hargrove arrived in the city on a Thursday morning. He did not come with an entourage. He did not announce himself. He traveled the way he always traveled when he wanted to see something true. Alone, in ordinary clothes, with nothing about his appearance that would signal to anyone who he actually was. He was 46 years old, tall, with dark hair threaded through with silver at the temples, and the kind of face that looked like it had been weathered by serious thought. He had built his first business at 23, with a loan from his mother that she had taken from the savings she had accumulated across 2 decades of working. He had paid her back, within 18 months, with interest, which she had refused, which he had deposited into an account for her anyway. That was the nature of their relationship. She gave, he returned. She refused, he persisted. They were, in this way, perfectly matched. He sat in the back of an ordinary taxi and looked out at the city passing by and thought about what his mother had said to him on the phone. She had not told him everything. She never told him everything immediately. She had a habit of releasing information in careful portions, like she was feeding something that needed to be approached slowly. But what she had told him was enough. She had been to the Maple Street store. Something had happened. Someone had been unkind to her and someone else had been kind, and she wanted him to see both of those people for himself before she told him anything more. He had learned long ago not to question his mother's instincts. The taxi pulled up outside Hargrove's supermarket on Maple Street at 9:47 in the morning. Richard looked at the storefront through the window. The signage was clean. The windows were well maintained. From the outside, it looked exactly as a well-run supermarket should look. He had 42 other stores that looked exactly the same from the outside. He had learned that the outside of a thing told you almost nothing about the inside of it. He paid the driver and stepped out onto the pavement. He stood for a moment in front of the store and breathed the cold morning air. Then he put his hands in his jacket pockets and walked through the automatic doors like any ordinary person on any ordinary Thursday morning. No one looked up. No one recognized him. The store moved around him in its ordinary rhythm. Customers, trolleys, announcements over the intercom, the soft mechanical beep of registers. He picked up a basket at the entrance. He began to walk the aisles. He was looking for two people. He did not know their names yet, but his mother had described them both with the kind of precision that only comes from paying very close attention. And Eleanor Hargrove, whatever else could be said about her, had always paid very close attention. He would find them. He had all day. Richard found Lisa first. She was exactly where his mother had described her. Register 3, positioned at the front of the store, like someone who had claimed territory and intended to defend it. She was attractive in a calculated way, put together with the kind of deliberate precision that announced itself before she even opened her mouth. He watched her from the end of the aisle, pretending to examine a jar of pasta sauce, and what he saw in the first 4 minutes told him more than any performance review or staff report ever could. A young mother approached the register with a toddler on her hip and a basket full of groceries. The toddler reached out and knocked a small display of mints off the counter edge. They scattered across the floor in every direction. The mother immediately began apologizing, shifting the child to her other hip and bending awkwardly to pick them up. Lisa watched her struggle for a full 30 seconds without moving, without offering to help, without saying a single word of reassurance. She simply stood behind her register with her arms loosely crossed and waited, the way someone waits for an inconvenience to resolve itself. When the mother finally straightened up, flushed and flustered, and placed her basket on the belt, Lisa began scanning items without making eye contact. No smile, no acknowledgement. Just the mechanical performance of a job being done at the absolute minimum level required to keep it. Then a man in an expensive coat joined the back of the line. Something shifted in Lisa's posture immediately. A subtle straightening, a softening around the eyes, the sudden appearance of a warm professional smile that had been entirely absent 30 seconds earlier. She caught the man's eye over the young mother's shoulder and gave him a small apologetic smile, as if to say, I know, it is almost over." Richard placed the pasta sauce in his basket and moved on. He had seen enough of Lisa. Now he needed to find the other one. He found Maya in the stock room. He had asked a passing colleague where the stock room was, explaining that he thought he had left his phone near the delivery entrance, and the colleague had pointed him down a long corridor without a second glance. The door to the stock room was propped open with a box, and Richard stopped just outside it and looked in. Maya was alone. She was working through a pallet of canned goods, checking each item against a clipboard list, placing them methodically into a trolley for restocking. The stockroom was cold and poorly lit and smelled of cardboard and industrial cleaning fluid. It was nobody's idea of a pleasant place to spend a morning. But Maya was not performing misery about it the way some people perform misery when they feel they have been wronged. She was simply working, steadily, carefully, with the focused quiet of someone who has decided that the quality of their effort is the one thing no one can take from them. Richard leaned against the doorframe and watched her for a moment. She was young. Younger than he had expected somehow, though his mother had told him she was young. There was something about the way she carried herself that suggested an older weight, the particular posture of someone who has been responsible for more than their years should require. She moved efficiently, without wasted motion, ticking items off her list with a small pen she kept tucked behind her ear between entries. Then she paused. She set the clipboard down on the nearest shelf and pressed both hands flat against it, and dropped her head forward and stayed very still. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Richard to understand that she was holding something back, some wave of feeling that had chosen this private, ugly, cardboard-scented room to finally push against its boundaries. Her shoulders rose with one long breath, then fell. Then she picked up the clipboard again and went back to work. Richard felt something move through his chest that he did not immediately have a name for. It was not pity. He had known enough people in genuine struggle to understand that pity was the last thing someone like Maya would want from anyone. It was something closer to recognition, the particular feeling of seeing someone fight quietly and wondering how long they have been fighting without anyone noticing. He stepped back from the doorway before she could see him. He had seen enough of Maya, too. Now he needed to see the manager. The store manager's name was Gerald Patterson. He was 51 years old, soft-spoken, and had the permanently slightly stressed expression of a man who spent his days trying to keep too many things balanced at once. He was in his office at the back of the store when Richard knocked and pushed the door open, and Gerald looked up from his desk with the polite but slightly wary expression he used for anyone he did not immediately recognize. "Can I help you?" Gerald said. Richard closed the door behind him, pulled out the chair across from Gerald's desk and sat down without being invited to. Then he placed his company identification on the desk between them, a small black card with clean white lettering. Gerald looked at the card. Then he looked at Richard. Then he looked at the card again. The color left his face so completely and so quickly that Richard almost felt sorry for him. "Mr. Hargrove," Gerald said. His voice had changed entirely. I had no idea you were... Nobody told me you were coming." "That was intentional," Richard said. His voice was calm and even, not unkind but not warm either. The voice of someone who has important things to discuss and a limited appetite for theater. "I prefer to see how things actually run rather than how they run when people know they are being watched. I am sure you understand." Gerald nodded rapidly. He had straightened in his chair so completely, he looked like a different person than the man who had been sitting there 30 seconds ago. "I need some information," Richard said. "I need you to tell me about 2 members of staff, a cashier on Register 3, and a bagger who I understand has been recently reassigned to the stock room." He paused. "And I need you to be entirely honest with me. Not the version you think I want to hear. The actual truth." Gerald swallowed. He looked at the black card on the desk between them as though it were making him personally responsible for everything that had ever happened in this building. "Of course," he said. "Of course, Mr. Hargrove. Whatever you need." Meanwhile, Maya's morning in the stockroom stretched into afternoon. She had worked through the entire pallet of canned goods and moved on to a delivery of dry goods, rice, pasta, flour, stacking and logging and stacking again. Her back ached from the cold. Her feet ached from the concrete floor. But she kept moving because movement was the only thing that kept the thoughts at bay. She was on her break, sitting on an upturned crate in the corner of the stockroom with a thermos of tea she had brought from home, when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A message from the home care nurse who visited her mother 3 times a week. "Your mum had a difficult morning. pain levels higher than usual. She didn't want me to tell you, but I thought you should know. She kept saying not to worry you, just wanted you to be aware. Maya read the message 3 times. She set the thermos down carefully on the floor beside her feet. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. She looked up at the strip light overhead, flickering slightly, the way it always flickered, the way she had already filed a maintenance request about twice that nobody had acted on. Her mother, 58 years old, and spending her mornings in pain, in a small flat 2 bus rides away, and telling the nurse not to worry Maya, because that was who Margaret Johansson was. She would be burning and still tell everyone around her that she was perfectly fine, perfectly comfortable, nothing to worry about. Please worry about yourself instead. Something cracked open inside Maya's chest. She pressed her hand harder against her mouth and breathed through her nose and refused, absolutely refused, to fall apart in this stockroom on this Thursday afternoon. She had bills to pay. She had a job to keep. She had a mother who needed her to hold it together even on the days when holding it together felt like trying to carry water in her bare hands. She picked up her phone and typed back, "Thank you for telling me. Please make sure she has her medication. I will be there tonight. Tell her I love her." She sent the message. She finished her tea. She stood up, straightened her back, and walked back to the pallet. She did not know that 40 meters away, in the manager's office, a conversation was happening that was about to change the entire direction of her life. She did not know that the man in that office had spent his morning watching her carefully and had come to a conclusion that Gerald Patterson was currently scrambling to understand. She did not know any of it. She just kept stacking. Back in Gerald's office, Richard had heard everything he needed to hear. Gerald had told him about the incident at the register, about the conduct report Lisa had filed, about the HR meeting, about the written warning and the stockroom reassignment. He had told it the way a man tells a story when he knows the person listening has the power to end his career. Carefully, completely, with the uncomfortable addition of details he would perhaps have preferred to leave out, including the fact that he had signed off on Maya's reassignment, without pushing back on Lisa's account of events as hard as he perhaps should have. Richard had listened without interrupting, without reacting visibly, without giving Gerald any indication of what he was thinking. It was a skill he had developed over many years, the ability to receive information with a completely neutral face while processing it at considerable depth. When Gerald finished, Richard was quiet for a long moment. "One more question," Richard said finally. Gerald sat forward. "The girl in the stock room," Richard said. "Maya. In your honest assessment, not the file, not the report, your actual, personal assessment. What kind of employee is she?" Gerald did not hesitate, and in not hesitating he revealed something true. "She is the best person we have in this store," he said quietly. "Honestly. I should have said that in the HR meeting. I did not say it loudly enough, and I have felt uncomfortable about that ever since." Richard looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Thank you, Gerald," he said. "I will need you to gather the full staff roster. I want everyone available tomorrow morning at 9, every single person on shift." He stood and picked up his black card from the desk. "And Gerald, do not tell anyone I was here today. Not a single person." Gerald nodded so vigorously his glasses shifted on his nose. "Of course, Mr. Hargrove. Absolutely. Not a word." Richard walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame and looked back once. "Get some rest tonight," he said. "Tomorrow is going to be a significant day." He left Gerald sitting at his desk, staring at the space where the most powerful man in the company had been sitting 30 seconds ago, wondering how many other Thursdays in his career he had let the wrong people win and said nothing. The answer, Gerald suspected, was more than he would like to count. Friday morning arrived with a clarity that felt almost deliberate. The kind of morning where the sky is sharp and blue and the air has a bite to it that makes everything feel more awake, more alive, more consequential than ordinary days. Maya noticed it when she stepped off the bus at 7:40 and stood for a moment on the pavement outside Hargrove's supermarket, looking up at the sky. She did not know why she paused. She could not have explained it. Something in the atmosphere felt different, charged in a way she had no language for yet. She pulled her coat tighter and walked through the doors. The store was already buzzing with an unusual energy. Staff members were gathered in clusters near the entrance, speaking in low voices, with the particular animated uncertainty of people who have been told something is happening, but not what that something is. Maya caught fragments as she passed. All staff meeting, 9 o'clock, Gerald's orders, nobody knows why, and felt the first quiet stirring of something she could not quite name. Not hope exactly. She had learned to be careful with hope, but something adjacent to it, something that made her stand a little straighter as she clocked in. Lisa was already there, leaning against the customer service counter with her arms folded and her expression arranged into one of studied indifference. But Maya had spent enough time watching Lisa to know the difference between her real indifference and her performed indifference. This was the performed kind. Underneath it, Lisa was alert and watchful, and trying very hard not to appear either of those things. Their eyes met briefly across the store floor. Lisa looked away first. At 9 o'clock precisely, every member of staff on shift gathered in the staff area at the back of the store. There were 23 of them in total. Cashiers, baggers, stockroom staff, department supervisors, the deli counter team. They arranged themselves in the loose, uncomfortable formation of people who have been summoned without explanation and are trying to look relaxed about it. Gerald stood at the front of the room. He looked, Maya thought, like a man who had not slept particularly well. "Thank you all for being here," Gerald began. "Before I say anything else, I want to introduce someone." He paused and looked toward the door at the side of the room. Richard Hargrove walked in. The room changed instantly. Not dramatically. There was no gasp, no immediate recognition from most of the staff. Richard was dressed simply, a dark jacket and plain trousers. Nothing that announced wealth or power. But there was something about the way he moved through a room, a completeness of presence, a quality of absolute self-possession, that made people instinctively pay attention before they knew why. "Good morning," Richard said. His voice was quiet and clear and carried easily across the room without effort. "My name is Richard Hargrove. I own this store. I own all 43 Hargrove supermarkets across the country, including this one." He paused and let that settle. Around the room, faces shifted, confusion becoming recognition, becoming varying degrees of alarm. "I was here yesterday. Some of you may have seen me without knowing who I was. I prefer it that way. I find that the truth of a place reveals itself most clearly when nobody is performing for an audience." The room was absolutely silent. Maya stood very still near the back. Her heart was beating in a way she was acutely aware of. Not fast exactly, just deliberate, like it understood that this moment required its full attention. Richard looked across the gathered faces slowly, unhurriedly, the way someone looks when they are not searching for a reaction, but simply taking account of what is there. "2 days ago," he said, "my mother came into this store. She is 74 years old. She came alone, on foot, in worn clothes, to buy a small amount of groceries. She paid with coins." He paused. "I want to talk about what happened next." Lisa felt the first real crack of fear move through her at the word mother. She stood near the front of the group. She had positioned herself there deliberately, as she always did, because standing near the front communicated confidence, and confidence communicated managerial potential. But now, the front felt exposed in a way it had never felt before. She kept her expression neutral with enormous effort. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. Composure was her armor, and she wore it well, but her hands, folded in front of her, had tightened against each other until her knuckles had gone pale. She thought about the old woman at Register 3. The trembling hands, The scattered coins, the line of customers behind her. She thought about what she had said and how loudly she had said it, and how she had turned to the customers behind the old woman and invited them to share her impatience. She thought about the 3 customer statements she had collected that night, the phone calls she had made, the version of events she had carefully shaped, the way she had framed Maya's intervention as insubordination rather than kindness. She thought about all of it in the space of approximately 4 seconds and understood, with a cold and absolute clarity, that she had made a catastrophic mistake. One member of staff, Richard continued, chose to participate in making my mother feel ashamed. She was loud about it, she was deliberate about it, and when another member of staff stepped in to help, not out of obligation, not for recognition, but simply because it was the right thing to do, that same person filed a conduct report designed to punish the kindness. He paused. I have read that report. I have spoken to Gerald. I have spoken to HR, and I have spent time in this store with my own eyes observing the culture that exists here. He looked slowly around the room again. Culture, in any organization, is not created by policy. It is created by the people who are allowed to set the standard. When unkindness is allowed to set the standard, and when kindness is punished for disrupting it, the culture is broken, and a broken culture is my responsibility to fix. He turned slightly, and his eyes found Lisa. Lisa met his gaze. She held it for exactly 2 seconds, and then looked at a point just past his shoulder, because looking directly at him had become physically impossible. Lisa Chambers, Richard said. Her name in his mouth was not angry. It was not cruel. It was simply factual, which was somehow worse than either. Your employment with Hargrove's supermarket is terminated, effective immediately. Gerald will provide you with the relevant paperwork and ensure you receive everything you are legally entitled to. You will be escorted from the building this morning. The room did not make a sound. Lisa did not make a sound. Something moved across her face. Not the composed professional mask she had worn for 3 years in this building, but something underneath it. Something unguarded and raw that the mask had always been there to conceal. It was there for only a moment. Then she straightened, lifted her chin, and walked to the door, with the rigid, careful posture of someone who has decided that whatever else happens, they will not let anyone see them break. The door closed behind her. Richard let the silence breathe for a moment. Then he turned his eyes to the back of the room. Maya Johansson, he said. Maya's breath stopped. Every face in the room turned toward her. She stood among her colleagues, feeling suddenly and completely exposed, like something private had been placed without warning under a very bright light. She did not move. She looked at Richard and waited. Would you come forward, please? He said. She walked through the parted group to the front of the room. She was aware of every step. She stopped a few feet from Richard and looked at him directly, because whatever was happening, she had decided she would face it straight on. Up close, he was less intimidating than she had expected. There was something in his eyes. A gravity, yes, but also something warmer underneath it. Something that reminded her unexpectedly and inexplicably of the old woman at the register. The same quality of paying genuine attention. The same sense of seeing, rather than merely looking. I owe you an apology, Richard said. Maya blinked. Of everything she had prepared herself to hear, that was not it. This company allowed a culture to exist in this store that punished you for doing something decent, he said. You were written up. You were demoted. You spent yesterday in a cold stock room because you chose to treat my mother like a human being when no one else would. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath the steadiness. Something that had been there since his mother had called him and said, I want you to go to the store, Richard. Something that sounded, if you listened carefully enough, very much like gratitude held at enormous depth. That should never have happened, and I am sorry that it did. Maya opened her mouth and closed it again. She had 1,000 things she could have said. She said the truest one. "I would do it again," she said quietly. "I would do it every time." Richard looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly, with the particular nod of someone who has just had something confirmed that they had already suspected was true. "I know you would," he said. "That is exactly why I am offering you the position of store manager of this location, effective immediately, with a salary that reflects the responsibility and a full review of your previous conduct record, which will be expunged entirely." He paused. "You will also find that your mother's outstanding medical bills have been taken care of. That is not a business decision. That is a personal one, from my family to yours." The room exhaled around her. Somewhere behind her, someone made a sound that was half laugh and half something else, entirely. Maya stood very still. She thought about 47 days of counting. She thought about the nightstand photograph and the dark ceiling and the message from the nurse that had cracked something open in her chest. She thought about her mother, her tired smile and her insistence on not worrying anyone in the way she had always believed that goodness was worth practicing, even when the world gave you no evidence that it was paying attention. She felt her eyes fill and blinked hard and lifted her chin. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was rough at the edges, but it held. "Please, tell your mother thank you. For me. Please tell her." "You can tell her yourself," Richard said. And then the side door opened. Eleanor Hargrove walked in. She was dressed simply, a pale blue coat, her wooden cane tapping softly against the floor. She looked exactly as she had looked at Register 3 2 days ago. The same pale blue eyes, the same patient steadiness, the same quality of seeing everything while appearing to observe nothing. She walked directly to Maya and stopped in front of her, and looked up at her with an expression that had been building since the moment a young woman with steady hands had knelt beside a conveyor belt and sorted coins without making her feel ashamed. "There she is," Eleanor said softly. And then she opened her arms. Maya stepped into them without hesitation. This woman she had met for 4 minutes. This stranger who was not a stranger. This small, fierce person who had walked into an ordinary supermarket in worn clothes and changed the direction of Maya's entire life simply by being there to witness who Maya truly was. She held on. Eleanor held on. Around them, the room was silent, the beautiful, specific silence of people witnessing something true. That evening, Maya sat beside her mother's bed in the small flat 2 bus rides away, and held Margaret Johansson's hand and told her everything. She told it slowly, carefully, the way you tell a story you are still not entirely sure is real. Her mother listened without interrupting, which was unusual. When Maya finished, Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at her daughter with eyes that were bright and exhausted, and full of something enormous. "I always told you," Margaret said. "Didn't I always tell you? Goodness finds its way back." Her hand tightened around Maya's. "I always told you, my love." Maya pressed her mother's hand against her cheek. "You did," she whispered. "You always did." Outside the window, the city moved through its ordinary evening. Cars and voices and distant music and the 10,000 small details of lives being lived in all directions. But inside that small room, in the warm quiet between a mother and a daughter, something had settled that no conduct, report, or cold stock room or deliberate cruelty had been able to permanently disturb. The truth of who Maya was, and the proof that it had always been enough. And that is where we leave them. Maya, standing in a life that finally has room to breathe. Eleanor, back in her garden, content in the knowledge that goodness still exists in the ordinary places. Richard, learning what his mother has always known, that the most important things are rarely visible from the outside. And Lisa, somewhere out there with the long quiet work of becoming someone worth being, still ahead of her. Because here is the thing about kindness. It does not always make the headlines, it does not always get the credit, Sometimes it gets written up and sent to the stockroom and told to mind its own business. But it always finds its way back to the surface. It always gets seen by the right pair of eyes eventually. Maya proved that, and so did Eleanor. So here's the question this story leaves with you today. And we want you to sit with this one genuinely. Think about the last time you walked past someone who needed a moment. Think about the last time the line was long and the patience was short and someone was struggling and the easier thing was to look away. What would you have done? What will you do next time? Drop your answer in the comments below because this community is built on real conversations and real reflections, and your answer matters. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, hit that like button right now because it helps more people find stories like this one. Subscribe if you are not already here, because every week we bring you stories that remind you what people are truly capable of when they choose to be their best selves. We will see you in the next one.